forcing Speaker Johnson's hand on the Epstein investigation. In a major escalation tonight, the Attorney General of Arizona and Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva of Arizona are suing Mike Johnson. And they're suing him because Grijalva has not been sworn in. So what does all this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Because it does at its heart. Grijalva is the final vote needed for a bipartisan maneuver called a discharge petition that goes around Johnson. Because he does not want a vote to release the full Epstein files. This would go around him, get that vote to release the files. Grijalva was elected in Arizona 28 days ago, a whole month. And Johnson has, in that time, used every excuse not to swear her in.
Look, we'll schedule it, I guess, as soon as she wants. It has nothing to do with...
As soon as the Democrats vote to reopen the government.
Okay, so this is absolutely insane. And I need you to hear what just happened. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, just got hit with a federal lawsuit that is exposing exactly what he's been trying to do behind closed doors. And let me tell you, this is bad. This is really, really bad for him. Because what he's accused of doing isn't just some procedural technicality or boring congressional rules dispute. He's being accused of literally blocking a duly elected member of Congress from taking her seat. He's being accused of deliberately preventing the will of the voters from being carried out. And the timing of all this, come on. The timing tells you everything you need to know about what's really going on here. This isn't about following rules or respecting precedent. This is about power. This is about manipulation. And now the courts are getting involved to put a stop to it. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
She deserves to have all the pomp and circumstance that everybody else does. Have her family and friends in the balcony.
But, so if she flies in her family, would you guys do it?
She'll get the full bells and whistles. It hasn't been scheduled because we don't schedule things for pro forma.
And when Grijalva called Johnson out on not swearing her in, and doing it, she says, to protect Jeffrey Epstein and his high-powered clients, Johnson had this to say.
Bless her heart, she's a representative-elect. She doesn't know how it works around here.
Well, putting the condescension aside, she does know she's supposed to be sworn in. That, of course, is democracy 101, right? You get elected by the people of your state and you get sworn in. That's democracy. And tonight, the Arizona Attorney General, Chris Mays, whom I'll be speaking to in just a moment, writes, and I quote, in this lawsuit, Speaker Johnson has not identified any valid reason for refusing to promptly seat Ms. Grijalva. Instead, on information and belief, Speaker Johnson wishes to delay.
So here's what happened. Arizona just held a special election to fill a vacant congressional seat. The voters spoke clearly. They elected Adelita Grijalva, a Democrat, to represent them in Congress. She won the election fair and square. There's no dispute about the results. There's no recount needed. There's no question about her qualifications. She met every single requirement to serve. The people of Arizona chose her to be their voice in Washington. And Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is refusing to swear her in. He won't let her take her seat. He won't let her vote. He won't let her represent the constituents who elected her. He's just blocking her, keeping her out, pretending like the election didn't happen. And the excuse he's giving is absolutely ridiculous. He's claiming that because the government is in a shutdown, because the House isn't technically in session, he doesn't have to administer her oath of office right now. He's saying he'll get around to it eventually. Maybe when things calm down. Maybe when the shutdown ends. Maybe when he feels like it. But here's the thing, and this is what the lawsuit is all about. The Constitution doesn't say the Speaker gets to decide when elected officials take their seats. The Constitution says that if you win an election and you're qualified to serve, you get sworn in. Period. End of story. There's no asterisk that says unless the Speaker is busy, or unless there's a shutdown, or unless it's politically inconvenient for the majority party, the voters chose their representative. That representative has every right to serve. And Mike Johnson is standing in the way because, and this is the part that should make everyone furious, because letting her in might change some upcoming votes that he doesn't want to lose. That's what this is really about. He's not following some sacred precedent. He's not respecting some important tradition. He's manipulating the process to maintain his razor-thin majority for as long as possible. And now Arizona's Attorney General has had enough. They filed a federal lawsuit on October 21st, accusing Johnson of unlawfully blocking Grijalva's swearing in despite her clear electoral victory and obvious qualifications. The lawsuit argues that what Johnson is doing violates the Constitution itself. It deprives Arizona voters of the representation they're entitled to. It obstructs a qualified elected official from performing her duties, and it sets a dangerous precedent that any speaker could use in the future to simply refuse to seat members of the opposing party whenever it's convenient. Think about how insane that would be. Imagine if this becomes normal. Imagine if every time a special election happens, the speaker just gets to decide whether or not to recognize the results based on how it affects their vote count. That's not democracy. That's authoritarianism with extra steps. That's a speaker acting like they have more power than the voters themselves. And what's Johnson's response to all of this? He called the lawsuit, and I'm paraphrasing here, patently absurd. He said it's just a publicity stunt. He insisted that he plans to swear her in eventually, once the House reconvenes and everything gets back to normal. But here's the problem with that excuse. The Constitution doesn't have a waiting period. The Constitution doesn't say swear them in when it's convenient for you. The Constitution says elected officials who are qualified get to serve. And every single day that Johnson delays, every single vote that happens without Grijalva in her seat, is a day that Arizona's voters are being denied their constitutional right to representation. This is wild. This is the Speaker of the House being sued for refusing to let democracy work the way it's supposed to work. And the lawsuit makes clear that this isn't just about one congresswoman. It's about the principle that voters get to choose their representatives, not speakers. It's about the principle that elections have consequences, not procedural delays. And it's about the principle that no one, not even the Speaker of the House, gets to overrule the will of the people because they don't like the outcome. So today we're going to break all of this down. We're going to look at exactly what Johnson is accused of doing. We're going to examine the legal arguments on both sides. And we're going to talk about why this matters so much for the future of American democracy. Stay with me here, because this story is about to get even wilder. All right, let's really dig into what's happening here, because there's a lot more going on than just a procedural dispute over when someone gets sworn in. This is about power and manipulation, and a speaker who's willing to bend the rules as far as they'll go to maintain control over the House. So let me walk you through exactly how we got here and why it matters so much. First, you need to understand the context. The House Republican majority right now is incredibly thin. We're talking about just a handful of seats separating the two parties. Every single vote matters. Every single member makes a difference. And when you're operating with margins that tight, losing even one vote on a controversial issue can mean the difference between winning and losing. Mike Johnson knows this better than anyone. He's been struggling to keep his caucus together on issue after issue. He's been dealing with rebellions from the right flank. He's been facing criticism from moderates. And he's been trying to navigate a government shutdown that's made everything 10 times harder. So when Arizona held its special election and the Democrat won, Johnson suddenly had a problem, because swearing in Adelita Grijalva would shift the math even further against him. It would make his already impossible job even more difficult. And there were some very important votes coming up that he couldn't afford to lose. So what did he do? He decided to just not swear her in. He decided to use the shutdown as an excuse to delay her taking her seat. He claimed he was following something he called the Pelosi precedent, suggesting that when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, she did the same thing during similar circumstances. But here's where things get interesting, because when you actually look at what Pelosi did, it's not the same situation at all. And more importantly, even if it were the same situation, that wouldn't make it constitutional. Just because one speaker did something questionable doesn't mean the next speaker gets to do it too. That's not how the Constitution works. That's not how precedent works. That's just making excuses. The lawsuit filed by Arizona's Attorney General makes this crystal clear. It argues that the Constitution mandates elected officials be sworn in if they're qualified to serve. There's no exception for shutdowns. There's no exception for when the House isn't in session. There's no exception for when it's politically inconvenient for the Speaker. The Constitution is clear. If you win your election and you meet the qualifications, you get to serve, period. And the lawsuit goes further. It argues that Johnson's actions aren't just unconstitutional, they're also strategically timed to affect specific upcoming votes. And this is where the story gets really juicy, because one of the votes that was coming up, one of the votes that Grijalva would have been able to participate in if she'd been sworn in, was related to the Jeffrey Epstein records. That's right, the same Epstein files we've been talking about for months, the same documents that powerful people in Washington seem desperate to keep hidden. The lawsuit suggests that Johnson's delay wasn't random. It wasn't about following procedure. It was about making sure certain votes went the way he wanted them to go before a Democratic member could tip the balance. Now I want to be careful here. The lawsuit makes allegations. It doesn't prove them definitively, but the timing is incredibly suspicious. And when you look at everything else Johnson has done, When you look at how he's handled other controversial issues, it's hard not to see a pattern. This is a speaker who's been willing to bend the rules to get what he wants. This is a speaker who's been willing to use procedural tricks to avoid votes he doesn't want to take. And this is a speaker who now stands accused of literally blocking an elected member of Congress from serving because it would hurt his party politically. The legal challenge contends that what Johnson is doing goes beyond just hurting Grijalva personally. It hurts her constituents. The people of Arizona who voted for her are being denied representation in Congress. They're being denied a voice in important debates. They're being denied the ability to have their interests represented on the House floor. And that's not just unfair, it's unconstitutional. The whole point of having elected representatives is that the people get to choose who speaks for them. When the speaker decides to override that choice, even temporarily, he's undermining the entire foundation of democratic government. And Johnson's response to all of this has been predictably dismissive and defensive. He called the lawsuit patently absurd. He characterized it as nothing more than a publicity stunt by Democrats trying to score political points. He insisted that he fully intends to swear Grijalva in, just not right now, just not during the shutdown, just not until the House reconvenes and everything gets back to normal. But here's the problem with that argument. The shutdown could last for weeks. The House might not reconvene for a significant period of time. And during all of that time, Arizona voters are without full representation. During all of that time, votes are happening that Grijalva should be participating in. During all of that time, Johnson gets to maintain his majority by simply refusing to acknowledge the results of a democratic election. That's not following precedent. That's not respecting tradition. That's gaming the system for political advantage. And the broader implications of this are terrifying when you think about them. If Johnson gets away with this, if courts don't step in and force him to swear Grijalva in, what's to stop future speakers from doing the same thing? What's to stop a speaker from just indefinitely refusing to seat members of the opposing party whenever there's any kind of procedural justification they can point to? Shutdown? Sorry, can't swear you in. Recess? Sorry, can't swear you in. Holiday weekend? Sorry, can't swear you in. The potential for abuse is enormous. And that's exactly why this lawsuit matters so much. It's not just about Adelita Grijalva. It's about establishing that speakers don't get to pick and choose which election results they recognize. It's about establishing that the Constitution means what it says. It's about establishing that voters, not politicians, get to decide who represents them. The lawsuit also connects to broader issues of legislative gridlock and the use of procedural maneuvers by political leaders to influence pending votes. We've seen this pattern over and over again in recent years. Leaders using every trick in the book to delay or prevent votes they don't want to take. Leaders manipulating the calendar to avoid accountability. Leaders treating the rules of Congress as suggestions rather than requirements. And Johnson's refusal to swear in Grijalva fits perfectly into this pattern. He's not doing this because he believes in some important principle. He's not doing this because the Constitution requires it. He's doing this because it helps him politically, and he's betting that by the time the courts get involved, by the time anyone forces him to do the right thing, the votes he cared about will already have happened. The damage will already be done, and he'll have gotten exactly what he wanted. But the lawsuit is trying to change that calculation. It's trying to get the courts to act quickly. It's trying to establish that what Johnson is doing is so clearly unconstitutional that it requires immediate intervention. And if the courts agree, if they rule against Johnson and force him to swear Grijalva in, it will set an important precedent for the future. It will establish that speakers can't just refuse to seat members whenever it's convenient. It will establish that elections have consequences that leaders have to respect. And it will establish that the Constitution isn't just a piece of paper that politicians can ignore when it suits them. Okay, so let's break this down into the key points you need to understand about this situation, because there's a lot of legal jargon and political maneuvering happening here, and I want to make sure you walk away with a clear picture of what's actually at stake. Point number 1, Johnson is being accused of violating the Constitution itself. This isn't some minor procedural dispute about parliamentary rules. This is a federal lawsuit alleging that the Speaker of the House is actively preventing a duly elected member of Congress from taking her seat. The Constitution is clear that elected officials who meet the qualifications for office have the right to serve. There's no exception that says unless the Speaker doesn't feel like swearing them in right now. There's no exception that says unless it's politically inconvenient for the majority party. Johnson's claim that he's just following precedent and waiting for the right moment doesn't hold up when you actually look at what the Constitution requires. And that's exactly what this lawsuit is forcing the courts to examine. Point number 2, the timing of all this is incredibly suspicious. Grijalva won her election fair and square. There's no dispute about the results. There's no question about her qualifications. The only reason she's not serving right now is because Mike Johnson decided not to swear her in, and the lawsuit alleges that this decision wasn't random. It was strategically timed to affect upcoming votes, specifically votes related to the Epstein records and budget discussions. Think about what that means if it's true. It means the Speaker of the House deliberately blocked an elected representative from serving so that he could control the outcome of specific votes. That's not leadership. That's manipulation. That's using your position to override the will of the voters because you don't like what they decided. Point number 3. Johnson's excuses don't hold up under scrutiny. He's claiming he's following something called the Pelosi precedent. He's saying that previous speakers have done the same thing during similar circumstances. But when you actually examine those claims, they fall apart. The situations weren't the same. The justifications weren't the same. And more importantly, even if previous speakers had done something similar, that wouldn't make it constitutional. Bad precedent is still bad precedent. Unconstitutional behavior is still unconstitutional behavior. You can't just point to someone else and say, they did it too, and expect that to be a valid legal defense. The Constitution doesn't have a grandfather clause that says unless someone else got away with it before. Point number 4. Arizona voters are being denied representation right now. This isn't some abstract legal question. Real people are being affected. The constituents who voted for Grava are currently without full representation in Congress. They elected someone to speak for them, and that person is being prevented from doing her job. Every day that Johnson delays the swearing in is another day that those voters are being denied their constitutional rights. Every vote that happens without Grava in her seat is a vote where Arizona's voice isn't being heard. And that's not fair to the voters. That's not fair to Grava. And that's not how democracy is supposed to work in this country. Point number 5. This sets a dangerous precedent if Johnson gets away with it. Think about the implications here. If a speaker can just refuse to swear in members of the opposing party whenever there's a procedural excuse available, what's to stop future speakers from doing the same thing constantly? Every shutdown becomes an opportunity to block new members. Every recess becomes an excuse to delay swearing-ins. Every procedural hiccup becomes a weapon to use against the other party. The potential for abuse is enormous, and that's exactly why courts need to step in and make clear that this kind of behavior isn't acceptable. Elections have consequences, voters get to choose their representatives, and speakers don't get to override those choices just because they don't like the outcome. Point number 6. Johnson's dismissive response tells you everything you need to know. When the lawsuit was filed, Johnson called it patently absurd. He characterized it as a publicity stunt. He acted like the whole thing was beneath him. But think about what he's actually accused of doing. He's accused of blocking a duly elected member of Congress from serving. He's accused of manipulating the process to affect specific votes. He's accused of violating the Constitution itself. And his response is to call it absurd. His response is to dismiss it as political theater. That's not the response of someone who's confident they're on solid legal ground. That's the response of someone who's hoping the whole thing blows over before anyone looks too closely at what he's actually done. Point number 7. This connects to broader patterns of congressional dysfunction. We've been watching for years as political leaders use every procedural trick available to avoid accountability and manipulate outcomes. We've seen government shutdowns used as leverage. We've seen parliamentary maneuvers used to block votes. We've seen rules bent and broken whenever it serves the interests of those in power. And Johnson's refusal to swear in Grzywa fits perfectly into this pattern. It's another example of a leader treating the rules as suggestions rather than requirements. It's another example of someone using their position to override democratic outcomes. And it's another example of why so many Americans have lost faith in their government's ability to function fairly. So where does this leave us? We've got a Speaker of the House accused of violating the Constitution by refusing to swear in an elected member of Congress. We've got a federal lawsuit demanding that he do his job and recognize the results of a democratic election. We've got Arizona voters being denied representation while Johnson plays procedural games. We've got suspicious timing suggesting this is all about controlling upcoming votes rather than following any legitimate precedent. And we've got a dismissive response from Johnson that suggests he doesn't take any of this seriously. The courts are going to have to decide whether the Constitution means what it says. They're going to have to decide whether speakers get to pick and choose which election results they recognize. And they're going to have to decide whether voters or politicians get the final say in who represents them in Congress. This case matters beyond just Adelita Grzywa and beyond just this particular moment. It matters because it will establish whether there are any limits on how far speakers can go to maintain their power. It matters because it will determine whether the Constitution provides any protection against this kind of manipulation. And it matters because it will send a message to future leaders about what they can and cannot get away with if Johnson wins if he's allowed to block elected members whenever it's convenient. We'll see more of this behavior, much more. Every close election will become an opportunity for the Speaker to delay recognition. Every controversial vote will become an excuse to keep certain members out. The incentives will be all wrong. But if the courts rule against Johnson, if they force him to swear Grijalva in immediately, it will establish that there are limits. It will establish that the Constitution means what it says, and it will establish that democracy, actual democracy, where voters get to choose their representatives, still means something in this country. Something has to give here. Either the courts step in and enforce the Constitution, or we accept that speakers can override election results whenever they feel like it. There's no middle ground. There's no compromise position. Either elected officials get to serve when they're elected, or they don't. And if they don't, if we accept Johnson's argument that speakers get to decide when and whether to recognize election results, then we've given up on something fundamental about how this country is supposed to work. Watch this case closely. It's going to tell us a lot about where we're headed. Hit that subscribe button because this story is far from over. The lawsuit is just the beginning. The courts are going to have to weigh in, and when they do, the ruling could reshape how Congress operates for years to come. Until next time.